More people to come in. Yeah, floor's open. So I'm Roman, for those of you who I don't know and don't know me. I'm the CEO of MyMiniFactory, and I'm going to be telling you about our vision for the world and what we're doing about it to empower 3D designers to share objects with people all around the world. Cool. So what is MyMiniFactory? MyMiniFactory is the YouTube of 3D printing. So we're a 3D printable object sharing platform that basically connects designers who upload and share content on the platform and 3D printer owners who have a need for this content. Why YouTube of 3D printing? YouTube is a content creator platform where creators share digital videos. We're a content platform where people share digital objects. But fundamentally, there's a lot of synergies with all the kind of digital content platforms that you are probably very familiar with. We're a 5-year-old startup. We're based in London, UK. And we have a few unique selling points compared to other platforms that are also in this similar game. First one is we're an independent platform, so we have no link with any one manufacturer or any one technology. We try to integrate with a number of different machines, as well as 3D design software on the upload side, and I'll show you how that all works in a minute. Second is we're an open platform, so anybody can upload everything and anything to MyMiniFactory, but everything has to be 3D printable. So we've actually put in place a unique curation process to make sure that the files that you'll end up downloading and printing on your machine will actually lead to a good experience. So we're not directing you towards crappy content that will probably just lead to you throwing the machine out of the window once you've had enough of that. Where we are in this 5-year journey, 45,000 objects on the platform, all guaranteed 3D printable. Uploaded and shared by some more than 8,000 designers on the platform, 200,000 registered members. Everything is free to download, and you don't even need to register to consume the content. Lots of social and cool features to actually organize your content, and very good reasons to actually create an account, of course, but very open and easy to download the free content. In terms of the demand, 375,000 downloads per month gives you an idea of how much people are consuming, and I'll also show you what people are consuming through some of the statistics that we publish. And before getting into what we do as a company, I'll tell you about what we believe in. Right? We believe that these desktop 3D printers will be everywhere in the future. Not necessarily the machines that you're seeing here today, the DIY kind of rep-based machines, but future iterations of the technology, of course. And that means that there's going to be a huge need for content, because creating and designing objects takes a lot of talent. And despite having the means to consume content, you're not necessarily going to have the creativity or the talent or the skills, for that matter, to create your own objects, right? So putting machines everywhere and thinking that everybody's going to turn into a designer is not necessarily the reality where we think things are going. So it's connecting these 3D printer owners who have a need for quality, high quality 3D printable content with the creative talents who actually know what they're doing in a way, right? The second thing we believe in is that there's going to be a huge explosion of content. Okay? A few years ago, if you wanted to create and learn how to design, you pretty much had to sign up for a 3-year university course. Exaggerating a bit, but not that much, right? The software was expensive, the software was difficult to learn, and just very few people, professionals pretty much, were creating 3D content that could eventually be 3D printable. There's several trends for the explosion of content. One is these design tools have become much easier to use, much more accessible. Fire up tinkercad.com, it's in your browser, it's free, it's online, lots of resources to learn how to get started, and certainly limitations to what you can do, but definitely a great ramp to start creating a lot of content. And it's a tool that I use, for example. Lots of offering, also the vectories, the self-CAD, lots of free, online, accessible 3D design tools, which are a reality today, which was not the case only a short few years ago. The second trend is these tools are being used by kids from a very early age, and they're becoming very much 3D native with this kind of technology. They're creating a lot of content from a very young age. So these kids are going to come to maturity and create their own brands, their own reputation, and upload and share a lot of content, which is very much embedded in the way they understand the digital world, right? It's totally natural for youngsters to understand that a video is something that you watch on YouTube.com in your browser online, not necessarily something that you wait at the right time to be in front of the TV for a program to start. So this pretty digitally native is using a lot of these tools that is creating a lot of content. And then the third trend is also the smartphones that we all have in our pocket are eventually going to become high-end 3D scanners. You can 3D scan with the smartphone today. It's entry-level kind of 3D scanning, but more and more of these phones with different sensors are going to become very much high-end 3D scanners. So just imagine the day where we can all capture an object by just popping out our smartphone, just like we're taking pictures and sharing them on Instagram, just like we're taking videos and sharing them on YouTube. Having that kind of sensoring capability in 3 billion pockets around the world is just going to participate in this explosion of content. And the title of this presentation is about empowering creators, and who do we think about? They're the designers who are uploading and sharing to MyMiniFactory, and a short selection of the 8,500 on this slide, with Devins, the Michels, the Morgans, the Michaels, and so on. They are fundamentally people who understand digital in terms of sharing content. These are designers who fundamentally might or might not, but they don't need to understand what it means to run a supply chain. They don't need to know what a factory in China looks like. They don't need to put their objects on a boat that brings it back to a shelf in the country where they might be selling their products. These are people who are building a digital brand, right, from the pre-sharing of digital content. And so these are the people that we think about on a daily basis when we think about empowering designers and creators to share content. They have faces. Right? And we did this little video, short 60-second video, just to celebrate the designers, so you get an idea of the content. It's about the long tail, right? So designers creating unique content and building up very unique brands, and that's really what we empower at the end of the day on MyMiniFactory. But of course, if you're a 3D designer and if you're building your brand and if you're building your reputation by sharing this digital content, you've got a bit of a problem. Because the only people who will eventually consume your unique, beautiful content are people who know and have access, know 3D printing and have access to a 3D printer. And they're probably people who have gone through this kind of exercise, like I'm sure a lot of people in the room next door, where 50% of the machines, I actually did the statistics this morning, are Prusa i3s. So you have a problem to build it together or customize it in a way that you can make good use of it. And of course, that's a problem because my mom is never going to do that, right? So if you're a talented 3D designer today, you're kind of limiting your audience to the people who will actually go through this kind of process. And I believe that the amazing creators that we have on the platform deserve to have their content consumed by a much wider audience, and people like my mom. But that's kind of okay, because once upon a time, this is what a computer looked like, right? And it was very much a DIY kind of thing, like 30, 40 years ago. A good 40 years ago. And this is what a computer looks like today. And okay, between the two, there's 40 years of innovation, diffusion of this innovation, adoption, but there's a lot more users, right? In terms of people who are using a computer now, billions and billions of people around the planet versus the kind of small number of greedy geeks who are building their own devices. And so 3D printers will follow the same kind of path with time. Second problem they have is a screenshot from some slicing software, and I've been printing for 6-7 years. I have no clue what these things mean, and I'm not necessarily very interested in learning what all of this means. I think it's too much, and again, something that even if I don't want to do it, my mom is certainly never going to do it. So again, designers have this problem that you kind of have to go through this process of learning what a lot of this means. And again, take the analogy of computers. This used to be how you control the computer, right? Command line type, MS-DOS, whatever you want to call it. Probably reminds me a few things. And it's great because once upon a time, then you have graphical user interfaces and it's much easier to use. We're not necessarily saying this is as easy to use as a smartphone, but a step in the right direction. So again, a lot of friction to be removed there and make it easier for more people to be able to consume content. And so what do we do at MyMiniFactory for kind of helping designers, empowering designers, helping them having their content consumed? Well, the designers here at the bottom of the slide and connected to the 3D printer owners at the top. And you kind of sit in the middle by being this platform that connects the two. And we're trying to remove as much friction as possible, right, between somebody having a spark and an idea for an object in their head, all the way to somebody on the other side of the world holding a physical copy of that spark that they had in their head. And so what that means is we basically integrate with a number of 3D design tools, tinkercad.com, for example. You can very easily upload, you certainly know, in one click from tinkercad.com, Vectory, SelfCAD, 3D Slash, and a number of plugins for more desktop-based 3D software, so very easy to upload and share. We have this database, the library, the repository part, even though I hate these words because we're much more of a community and it's about the people on the platform more than just the single objects next to each other. But the objects are hosted on MyMiniFactory. We have a unique quality layer in the sense that we do file checking, file repair, as well as making sure that the object has been printed before to build that trust in the content, to make sure that when you're browsing and exploring content, the object you choose to print, well, is going to lead to a good experience and not to something where you're going to blame the machine or the content for a bad experience. And again, that's just going to lead to you throwing the machine out of the window. And then we add a bunch of value-added services, click and print being one of them that I'll mention in a second. And then directly connect with software. For example, 3D printer slicers can use our API to download and pull the content directly inside that environment. And obviously, then off you go and print out the object and have the physical copy of the object. So we're trying to automate and make it easier for a lot of this process in the middle to make sure that there's less and less friction between the creator, the spark in your head, the idea for an object, and somebody on the other side of the world holding this physical copy of the object and giving feedback, sharing pictures, remixing this object, and off we go into a new cycle. The $100 billion question that everybody tries to answer is, okay, people have desktop 3D printers, but what the hell are we doing with it, right? And we've got a bit of information about that because we know what people are downloading and actually consuming. These are statistics that we publish every month on MyMiniFactory. If you go to the footer of the website on the left-hand side, you'll see a trends report link, and so we publish figures there. You can sign up for monthly notifications to get this kind of data. And there is some constants depending basically on if there is some viral object, if there are more uploads in a certain category or another, but the top 6 categories have remained the same. It's pretty small up there. Fan art is number 1, and I often mention fan art and props and cosplay together. So kind of very geeky, nerd stuff. Figurines of Yoda have been printed since 3D printing has been around, and they would end up in those kinds of categories. Cosplay is the more impressive, maybe more bigger projects as well in there, but still very nerdy and geeky kind of stuff. Very much in line with the early adopters who are using these machines today. So it makes a lot of sense that these categories are up there. Toys and games is a bit of a different category. Instead of reaching out to geeks and nerds, let's say, you're probably more reaching out to kids and families. So here in this case, we're 3D printing puzzles, we're 3D printing action figures and so on, but more functional objects. Home and garden, beautiful objects as well, whether functional or decorative. Scan the World, a unique collection of museum pieces, and I'll show you some examples of these categories. And then gadgets and electronics, the number 6 category in March. Those 6 categories have remained the same since we started publishing these numbers, so there is a certain constant in what we're seeing. We're also sometimes moving categories around. So for example, we isolated board games and tabletop from toys and games recently because it's a very important category and addressing a very different audience again from, let's say, a young child. This is probably more grown up, role-playing, RPG kind of content, scenery, miniature figurines, and we have specific plans as well for that category. So we've isolated that, but the top 6 have remained the same since we started measuring this and publishing this. When you think about like the potential for 3D printing and look at an area like toys and games, the figure on the left is 3D printed, the figure on the right and available, the file is available on MyMiniFactory. The action figure on the right, you can pick it up on Amazon.com, and I'm sure every equivalent that you might have in Sweden or elsewhere around the world, or in the US for that matter. The figure on the left, huge amounts of work went into that. It's print in place, it's support free. You print out the 3 colors, white, red, and black separately, and then just pop everything together. Super high quality content. Again, lots of work went into the design of the object, but it's very much a very fully functional action figure. And the function of these 2 objects, this one being, I assume, injection molded, they're very comparable at the end of the day. And if you download the file for free on MyMiniFactory and print it out with your filament, I think I used $24 per spool as the assumption on the left. It's going to cost you $6, and obviously $24 per filament. That's also a price that's going down, so it might be $4 today, and it might be $2 tomorrow, and less than $1 in not too long. The action figure on the right is nearly $13, and so you save 53%. So not only are you getting access to unique content, by the way, you can't find this character on Amazon.com, it just doesn't exist. It's kind of a niche community. Valiant is the publisher of what are they called? Sorry, comic books. Sorry, and they claim to be the 3rd behind DC and Marvel. So it's much smaller than most. So a unique content that you won't find anywhere else. But very high quality, very functional. Lots of effort went into that, and so on. So you're saving a lot of money, right? So if you look at the bottom-up calculation, it makes a lot of sense to use a 3D printer.
If you would donate a little bit to the guy who created it.
Yeah.
So $6, and then I think it would be nice to add another
tipping, for example. Yeah.
Hopefully more people do that in the future.
And we've got other plans as well for monetizing, and also selling files is something that we'll introduce in the near future. But certainly the free content. But you can imagine the price of the filament going down and that kind of being compensated as well. But certainly monetization is super important, especially when you think about content that takes a lot of time and iterations and so on to put together. Oh, for sure. This is really, I'm just looking at the marginal cost today with the $24 assumption and and so on. So I'm taking like figures as they are today. But that makes already a lot of sense. I mean, if anything, you're saving money.
Yeah, and on the right-hand side, you have to add on the shipping costs, maybe. Depends on where you're sending it.
Yeah, exactly. It might be Amazon Prime
in the US. Free, but on top of that, it's might be ending up at like 15, 16.
Yeah, I'm using real numbers, and this is probably not the case for everybody on the planet for sure. But I think for in the US, at least Amazon.com, where they ship most of their products, that's kind of the bottom-up saving. And if you look at the more macro trend for something like toys and games, this is something that's happened for every type of content that went digital, right? Once upon a time, you used to get into your car, drive to a bookshop, spend a bit of time in the bookshop, select a book, and then drive home with that book and eventually read it. And maybe you liked it, maybe you didn't, but you probably go through till the end because you made the trip for it. And then you could order your books online, and now you can just download a book on your Kindle or read a user-generated content, created book, for example, on a platform like Wattpad. Music stores used to be a reality. When was the last time you went into a music store, right? There's a different experience, and a few of them still exist, but 99% of the market is gone, right? Same thing, you order your books online, those are your CDs and DVD and music online, and now you just stream, right? Spotify, SoundCloud for the user-generated content version. Blockbuster, Netflix, and now we just stream our videos, same story there. And so if you look at the macro and for something like Toys R Us, Chapter 11 last year, very down under, they're basically in the business model of trying to figure out what a kid is going to want to buy in a year and a half, spending time designing it, manufacturing, putting everything on a boat, bringing it back, and storing it on a shelf until somebody decides to drive up to the Toys R Us and pick up the toy and bring it home. That's a model in the world of YouTube, SoundCloud, and Wattpad and Kindles that makes no sense whatsoever, right? So going from that spark that I might have in my head to somebody on the other side of the world being able to hold a physical copy of that idea and that concept might take hours, right? Max days, right? For you to design, iterate, share the content, print out your own, and then have somebody on the other side of the world. For toys and games, it takes 18 months, right? Makes no sense whatsoever in the world we live in today. So for sure, Amazon is eating up a lot of the lunch that Toys R Us had with their retail store. E-commerce is having a first step, but the pure digital distribution is going to happen. A lot of the materials make sense, of course. Hard plastic, you saw the action figure. If you drive up to Toys R Us, you're going to see a lot of hard plastic on a shelf. And at the end of the day, we're getting very, very close. And not only that, but the open model of a user-generated content platform like MyMiniFactory will always beat what a closed model can produce in terms of creativity, and especially for something like toys and games, where the value of the actual toy, the product, the item, is in the creativity, right? So an open platform is always going to win. So it's just a matter of time for more people to get access to these machines, and other industries than toys and games, which is, by the way, $100 billion market. It's not a small market. And that's all going to go through 3D printing, or at least for the things that make sense to 3D print with the technology that is accessible. So in the action figure, for example, so when I'm never going to say that you can 3D print everything and anything. That doesn't make any kind of sense, right? Machines can do specific things. Certain machines can do certain things. Other machines can't. But a scenario that makes a lot of sense, for example, is that I would probably still buy my Barbie doll at Amazon because the hair is complicated to print. But Barbie every morning is going to have a new pair of shoes, right? Because it'll have been published, and you can create new things, and you can consume in a very different way, right? So the fact that everything is going through the internet, the medium, right, is going to have a lot of impact on the media and how people consume and the type of content that's created. What it means to watch a video today is very different from what it meant to watch a video 10, 15 years ago when you did have to drive to Blockbuster, right? Maybe the whole family got together, selected the movie that at the right time, everybody would be behind the TV and watch it for an hour and a half, and because you have to drive back in it. If you don't like it, you don't like it, right? Now people will just watch a video if they have 3 minutes on the toilet, right? And it's very different. And so the content is also very different. The way you engage with your audience is very different. So not only taking the content that might be available and accessible today on a platform or a shop like Toys R Us, but what we consider to be a toy and the way we consume it is also going to be transformed because of the fact that we're sharing this content through the internet. Oops. There we go. Fan art, this is an example of fan art. We organize regular design challenges. Some are probably more adapted to beginners as an excuse to get started. This one was probably a bit more tailored to people who already know how to design, but this is an example of how we work with brands, IP owners, copyright owners to take their assets, their concepts, things that might already exist in the digital world. In the case of Capcom, here, stuff that exists in the world of video games and in 3D already, but not 3D printable. So working with these brands and IP owners, we're able to tap into the community of designers and inspire and create beautiful content for fans and audiences to relate to the game in the physical world. And so this is an example of a very successful design challenge that we did now early 2017, and some beautiful content was created as part of that. And so do check out design challenges and what we might be running with IP owners as well. Scan the World, I mentioned one of the popular categories on the platform. Scan the World is the world's largest 3D printable museum.
So cool.
It's 11,000. This screenshot was 8,000. Since then, I think that was around October. Since then, we've gone to 11,000 unique pieces. Museum pieces, other cultural institutions, private art collectors as well. Beautiful category to explore, to browse, to discover cultural content, and also content that's being remixed, for example, reintegrated into other content. It's a really unique collection of its kind. Again, everything printable, everything to make sure that you're going to have a good experience when 3D printing and consuming the physical copy of this object. That's an example. Scan the World, much like MyMiniFactory, is a very open project. Anybody can contribute to Scan the World, but we also capture some content ourselves. Locally, for example, we spent some time with the SMK in Copenhagen, where we captured a lot of their classical art using very professional 3D scanners. This is an example. This one in particular is from the V&A in London called Bearded Man, printed on a Raise 3D machine, which is the one that's being displayed, I think, in the area down there. 40, 50, something like that, centimeters high, and really high detail, right? This is actually a print. It's not a render or anything. It is, yeah. We love it as well. So it's really nice content. And so this is one of the 11,000 objects that you can find on MyMiniFactory. Very high detail content as well. Home and garden, I mentioned. Decorative objects, functional objects, things that you might need around the home or the garden, like the category says. Beautiful content. This one, this vase can actually be printed in 2 colors, designed by Devin from the Make Anything for that matter. So a good example of what you can print and really the type of content that you would expect to probably pick up at IKEA or Habitat or other places like that, and fully functional products, right? So again, think about displacing the consumption habits from a brick and mortar IKEA, Habitat, driving up to the store, selecting the vase, going home with the vase, to clicking a button and getting access to the content directly at home. So again, another huge industry that's being disrupted by 3D printing. Gadgets and accessories is the 6th category, a bit like the story of the Barbie doll getting her customized accessory, right? All of these physical products that we have around us, smartphones, for example, that can be enhanced through 3D printed customized accessories, right? So again, we're not saying that we're going to 3D print everything and anything. We're never going to 3D print. We might very far down the line 3D print smartphones, but that's not in the perimeter of desktop machines anytime soon. But of course, 3D printing a phone case, 3D printing a dock, 3D printing a tons of accessories that give you more capabilities for this core central product, the same way that this phone relies on the apps that you install on it that are, my phone is going to be very different from your phone, right? And so how do we increase the value of the core central product with all of these 3D printed accessories that we can plug around them? In this category, gadgets and electronics, you'll also find a lot of content around drones, for example, a lot of GoPro accessories, camera parts, and so on. You name it. If it's what you would expect to buy in an electronics shop, there's probably going to be high value, customizable content that makes sense for you to make more value, to get more value out of this content. This is an example of something that was created in Tinkercad. Tinkercad, some of you for sure know it. Very easy to use, online, browser-based, no installation required, lots of resources to get started and learn how to use it. Pretty self-explanatory to get started with simple shapes, and you can already create niche products, right? So integrating with all of these design tools and making it as easy as possible for people to upload and share their creations with the rest of the world is something that we're certainly working on. 3D scanners, I mentioned earlier, Sony has released on their latest flagship phones a 3D scanning app called 3D Creator. 3D Creator is basically using photogrammetry to scan objects and people. So just like the selfie is a thing, the 3D selfie, the 3D printable selfie, sorry, it is also a thing. And the quality of these scans is not yet professional, right? This is really the first iteration of a phone shipping with a natively installed application for 3D scanning. But remember the first iPhones or the first phones to have a camera sensor, those were really crap as well, right? And what it created was opportunities for platforms like Instagram for the pictures or YouTube for the video to actually be the platforms that distribute this content to a lot of people, right? And so in one click, you can very easily upload and share your 3D scan to MyMiniFactory. And because of just like this opportunity with Instagram to put filters to kind of compensate for the low quality, we added this one-click filter where you can basically add a Smurf hat on your 3D scan to kind of make it fun and social. So it's kind of also the Snapchat filter story, just to make it more viral and fun to upload and share content with people. So that's really for the creation side, designing in a tool like Tinkercad or using a 3D scanner, and that's becoming super, super easy. What needs to become more easier as well is the consuming side. So a machine that will be launching in the next few weeks and that we're kind of soft launching this weekend to get feedback, and that is displayed just on the other side in the entrance. Is the Shining 3D machine on top of which we've loaded some software that basically makes it possible to launch a print directly from your mobile app, the MyMiniFactory mobile app. So there's no more software to install apart from the mobile app on your phone. There's no more learning curve. You don't need to learn how to use a 3D slicer. You don't need to learn about settings and parameters. We automate a lot of those steps and make it possible for you in one click to just launch a print directly from your phone. And so that removes a huge friction. We inspired the discovery and the navigation of the app on things like Instagram or YouTube. So it's a feed, you can scroll through, you can browse and explore content in that way. And then just launching a print is just one click of a button. So the friction of learning about retraction and settings and so on, that's gone. If you know how to use Instagram, if you know how to use YouTube on your phone, you can pretty much know how to use a 3D printer now. And that's a big step, I think, in the right directions, whereby the technology that exists today, that has become cheap, and for $200 you can get a 3D printer, that has become reliable. Machines actually work now, which probably wasn't the case a short couple of years ago. Now it's about distributing and making this available to people who can really find value in the content that's being uploaded and shared and consume this content. So yeah, so as a short summary, MyMiniFactory empowering creators is about, first and foremost, making it possible for designers to actually have their content consumed. That's a reality for every type of content creator. If you're a YouTuber, the first thing you want is for your videos to be seen by people. If you're a DJ on SoundCloud, the first thing that you want is for people to listen to your music. If you're writing books on Wattpad, the first thing you want is for people to read your chapters. And so the first thing that we're trying to think about is making it possible for designers to have their content consumed, because that's the most satisfying thing at the end of the day, first and foremost. And of course, when we get to a world where there's hundreds of millions of 3D printers out there, we should be crossing the 1 million 3D printers sold per year next year or the year after, just to give you a bit of perspective in terms of the demand side. But if there's hundreds of millions of 3D printers, if there's hundreds of millions of people consuming the designer's content, then of course they're going to want to get paid for it. Because if they don't, like, they're just going to go back to the old world and manufacture for retail or e-commerce and manufacturing in the more traditional side of things. So a lot of what we're also thinking about is, like, how do we help content creators actually monetize their time, their content, their talents, right? We introduced tipping a few years ago. We have advertising revenue coming to MyMiniFactory. A lot of brands, filament companies, a lot of manufacturers of 3D printers have an obvious interest in putting their products in front of the community, and so that generates revenue that we can redistribute to content creators out there. It's still a fairly closed model today, but the plan is to obviously open up so that more and more content creators can just create a profile and have instant monetization in that way. We're also in the early stages of launching a file store, so understanding what it means for certain content categories and very premium content to actually sell a file, not the physical object, but the file that people can download and 3D print at home. And more things that we're thinking about, and some more on the early stages. You've probably heard about crypto and some things like that, but that could make sense for incentivizing content creators to upload and share content and monetize their content.
Do you have statistics of how many people are tipping?
Yeah.
How many people in total are tipping regarding in comparison to the content that is uploaded?
So
online?
I looked more at the total of everything, because again, it's not just one solution, it's a combination of other things. We're redistributing close to $100,000 in 2017 from the studios, advertising redistribution, from tipping, from prizes that go with design challenges. So it's starting to be a decent number, of course, and that's going to grow with the market and the demand, of course, right? It's still the early days, right? So think about how, sure, today, if you're going to be an entertainer, YouTube is probably a logical solution, because there are a lot of opportunities there. 10 years ago, it wasn't the case. Like, you would never make any kind of money uploading videos to YouTube. So that's just driven by the more people who consume content and spend time and the opportunities to redistribute this content. So it's very important. We need to keep in mind that it's very early days, of course, but still think about, like, how do we actually do this? How do we encourage people to create and share? And how do we give opportunities for designers to monetize this talent? So what we offer today is certainly not the end in any kind of way, but we're thinking of more ways to do this on a more scalable basis. But making it easy for people to consume, that's one thing, and then in parallel, like, getting designers paid, that's super critical, right? And for sure, the winning platform, because we're not the only ones to do this, we'll be the ones who crack this problem.
You're the best one.
No, thank you.
And you give back a lot to the community.
Again,
all these design challenges, you're very active. The other ones are just there, and you are very active. And this is why I always go to your site first.
Yeah, we understand that it's up to the designer. Like, we're not creating that much. We do occasionally opportunistically create some content, but it's first and foremost about the community. So we need to think about them. It's the mission statement. It's who we think about, and it's who we think about for creating new features and so on. And if you think about it, just as another conclusion, like if you do type this in Google, famous product designers, the problem I see when I see this is old white male, basically. So everybody is formatted. Everybody went to the same schools. Everybody has the same kind of mindset. And in many ways, it's formatting the kind of content that people can consume, right, and how people relate and so on. And so, just like being a video entertainer once upon a time meant that you were probably an old white male on television, and now it means completely different things, right? Anybody can get access to it. There's no more gatekeepers on the internet that allow you to start. Obviously, you still need talent. There's even more competition at the end of the day and other challenges, but less gatekeepers, right? And so we're going to transform that, right? So the type of people you will think about won't be the Philippe Starks of this world, but very different profiles, right? Because more and more people will be consuming what they want versus what somebody in the middle has decided that the market eventually will be consuming. So the best way to predict the future is to create it. That's really what the team is working hard to do. We have a strong vision. We think the world is going in one direction, and it's not going to go back. But still a lot of stuff to build, right? So if you have any questions, comments, or ideas, or anything you'd like to share, don't hesitate to get in touch. That's my email, Romain@MyMiniFactory, first name @MyMiniFactory.com. And thanks for spending some time in this room with me. Cheers. Thank you. Any questions?
One thing, what we see are designers doing things, in some cases, kind of copies of things.
Yeah.
I have not seen any movements from the industrial side, like household equipment for my refrigerator, and there's this little thing that actually is broken. Yeah. I have to go to the after sales, which is actually a plastic printable thing.
Yeah.
Are there any movements that they actually will publish the things? Because I think their logistics to distribute this spare part is quite high anyway, and it's not in stock, and they have to be shipped.
Or it's not existing anymore.
Or maybe not existing.
Yeah, you have to create it anyway.
Yeah. But they have prints and so on. So
there are already quite a lot of things like that available.
Where you can find the official Philips, Whirlpool, or
official.
No, that's what I mean. I also found the spare parts that was uploaded. Actually, to find, because then you have to tweak it, you have to design it yourself, and that's a millimeter here, and that was actually a little bit fillet that I didn't notice. And all that.
I have this problem recently.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have quite a bit of content, but mostly user-generated content on the platform. I think, as you mentioned, the spare part business for a lot of these home appliances companies, for example, it's a serious business. They sometimes are making money, but it's also got a lot of costs. You have to store a part in a warehouse for 10 years by law, pretty much. It's expensive. People can't find it, and at the end of the day, like the service for the end user goes down, right? And so we focus on the user-generated content at this point in time because that's who we are. We don't need to rely on negotiating with a brand, for example, to get them on board. They will eventually. It's a no-brainer for me, like just because of the added value for their consumers.
Upcycling is getting more and more important.
Yeah.
And more and more people want to upcycle. I'm a big fan of fixit.com, for instance. I love that stuff. So
and I think it's more than that. It's going to be a buying decision for consumers. Like if you give me a fridge, 2 fridges, and you tell me, well, this one is going to come with some parts expensive if it breaks, and it's up to you, and you won't find the parts, and your fridge will remain broken, or you'll have to replace it, and it doesn't make any sense. Or hey, look at this fridge, and by the way, it has an app store on MyMiniFactory where you can customize it, where you can replace certain parts, and that's just an argument for selling it, right? Again, the same way when I buy a phone, I don't buy the 12 apps that come natively installed on the phone. I buy the access to the Google Play Store, to the iOS App Store, and how to make it mine and customized and so on. And it's going to be exactly the same thing. So now there's very few brands that do it. For example, iGus has some parts on MyMiniFactory. It's one example, technical parts. We have run design challenges with appliances companies as well, but still focusing on the user-generated content side of things. We have a lot of conversations with these brands who are asking themselves exactly the same question: what is the added value? What is the business? But it's going to transform the way they do things. So I think the winning brands in the future, again, like if you give me 2 fridges and one is closed and one is open, people are just going to buy the open
But they need a
fridge.
distribution channel, and since you're now building up the community and its user base,
Yeah,
if you could attract also the industrial manufacturing
yeah,
side,
for sure.
that will of course build your base, because otherwise someone has to do it.
It's one of the.
You can monetize it, because they most likely want to have something paid for this spare
So
part.
that's okay, because
Yeah,
when
which
you
is
earn a
fine.
patent on it,
Yeah.
and you don't want to violate.
But I anyway have to
That's
pay if I
okay.
go to back to MediaMarkt and
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
wait 4 weeks or
That's
something.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's again, it's
It's
the
very
same.
small, I saw it. That's
Their parts,
yeah.
it's for
But that's because you don't have the access actually to the original parts.
I don't know if original is really, it makes some sense, but one of the reasons it's so low is like, okay, how many times is your fridge going to break down and like that part and so on, versus how many people go and watch Batman at the cinemas, right? There's just a big, Batman would be a good example of this kind of stuff. So I think there's good reasons for each part not being used as many, and if you break it once, you might not break it 100 times, right? So it's very different consumption habit in many ways. But it's something that's going to grow with awareness, with the amount of content available, of course, and we're still in this phase of building up the library and the repository. We have now, for example, monthly design challenges around spare parts. We launched one in January, which was very successful. Now we have themes every month for design challenges, again, to incentivize the community to create content. We're running one around computer parts. We just finished camera parts, and now we're doing computer parts, for example, and lots of content that makes sense, again, and problems that are really annoying. So my keyboard at work, the little feet at the back, they always break. They always break, and it's a real problem, because every time you hit a key, it annoys you, right? And you're going to hit thousands of keys per day. So it's not a stupid problem. It's a real problem. And a part like this, very simple to print, very 5 minutes, it's done.
Maybe it
works perfectly.
It's more stable than the original one, maybe.
Yeah, you can
I
optimize it.
really
Yeah.
printed one last week.
Yeah, I'm sure it does the job, right? And on top of that, you don't have the argument of quality, because it's probably hidden, you probably don't see it. If you want, you can customize it at the end of the day, but nobody's going to blame you for having layer height, invisible layers on something like that. It makes a lot of sense, and that's one of the reasons we're running a design challenge around computer parts. And there's many other things like that on your desktop computer, for example, that make a lot of sense. So spare parts, it's important. Obviously, it's one of the use cases and scenarios that everybody mentions when they think about 3D printing, upcycling, giving another life, and so on. It's a real pain for the industrial players, and it's going to be an argument. It's just taking off slowly, I guess. And a lot of these companies, they're corporate, and they take a lot of time to take decisions, and it's just going to be something that eventually will come through with more and more people having access to these devices. One thing that makes less sense, I guess, and for example, for one of these feet is getting it 3D printed by somebody else. Because
Hub would be interesting to incorporate, like Hub.
So one of the reasons, there's several reasons why we don't sell 3D printed objects.
No, not you, but maybe if somebody wants to print something and then something pops up and it shows next, not close to where you use some private.
But even connecting
they have to
to
prove that they are really good at printing, but they.
But there are other problems with that, which the EU Commission are discussing, because say if I design a part and then I publish it, and you have him print it for you, and then say it's a mechanical part supposed to hold a load or something. It breaks and someone gets injured.
Okay.
Who's responsible? He who printed it, me who designed it.
Yeah.
Today in the law, there is a gap there.
There's lots of questions like that will kick in. I try to focus on the things that do make sense versus the ones that are the extreme scenarios. But one of the reasons why we don't connect or sell 3D printed objects ourselves is, one, it's a totally different business, because in one case you're speaking to people who have a 3D printer. That's how you define your audience and the people who download and consume content. In the other case, you're speaking to people who by definition don't have a 3D printer, and they're kind of very different. So it's kind of building two businesses, and we're just focusing on one because we think these machines are going to be everywhere in the future. The other impact is on cost, and for a keyboard feed, it's one scenario. But in this case, for example, $6 to download and print at home, order of magnitude, twice that to buy it on Amazon, but this is roughly a 25-hour print. So if you're going to go to a platform like 3D Compare or Shapeways or 3D Hubs, for that matter, to get it printed by your neighbor or some factory not too far, service bureau not too far, for example, it's going to cost you 25 hours. You know, the market is roughly $10 per hour, $250. Nobody will ever pay $250 for something like that. So it's one scenario, because the feet, again, that can be a 5-bit print and the cost will be a lot less. But usually what you see is like 3D printing at home, very accessible. Amazon or retail or e-commerce are the prices we know, and then getting something 3D printed is much more expensive. And so not only is it building two businesses, but it's building a business where there's not real demand at the end of the day, and where not only we won't sell anything, but also on top of that, we would be telling a story which is just not right. The people who come to the website and see $250 on something like this would think we're crooks and that we're telling a story that makes no sense whatsoever. So those are some of the reasons why we don't sell physical objects, but focus on digital distribution. It's a big part of our vision and the reality of the demand.
So something else I would like to see is like e-learning. You know, for instance, I want to learn how to use Fusion 360, and I already told Mia that there's so many videos on YouTube. But on YouTube, I kind of get lost. I want to have a structured, you know, way of learning. Lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, and maybe you could have some YouTube creators that partner up with you, but they have to follow certain ways how to educate somebody. Because I'm a dental trainer. When I give a course, I really have like a cookbook, you know. Step 1, step 2, it has a structure in there. And lots of YouTubers, so I don't know, I have a problem following that.
So actually,
you know what I mean? My English, sometimes it's not so easy for me to explain things that are out of the box.
Autodesk, they have what you want on YouTube for Fusion 360.
Okay.
Their own.
Yeah, but this is just an example. It could be any kind of thing, you know, to design stuff or set brush, or it was just an example. So I wish something like that would be implemented.
Okay. We try, when we do design challenges in particular, we try to have some guidance sometimes and make it easy. Or, for example, create a template that people can customize or work around. So it's not like a blank page.
Good, you know? Paid video content. So if you want to watch only 3 lessons, you only have to pay 3 lessons. If you want to buy the whole package, I think it will be okay.
Yeah, makes sense.
I will pay for it.
Okay.
If it's really guided, you know.
Yeah.